Deserted Beijing's Wangfujing and Sanlitun, even the strongest province falters. Half of China's region missed economic targets in 2023. Great Depression in Beijing and Shenzhen, the strongest province collapsed. As the economy continues to slide, the undeniable reality is that consumer spending has taken a hit, and even China's capital city, Beijing, is not exempt from these challenges. It's 7 p.m. on a Monday evening in Sanlitun, and there are hardly any people out shopping. Even major tea beverage brands like Cha Baidao primarily focus on takeout orders with very few dine-in customers. There are 9.9 promotions everywhere you look, with businesses using discounted prices to attract customers or engaging in strategic partnerships to weather the tough economic times. For instance, some lemon tea shops are teaming up with sport betting companies, while others are opting for timely cost-cutting measures such as temporarily closing their stores to minimize losses. In a video, the blogger mentioned that after 3 years of the pandemic, in 2023, people would go wherever they wished. However, it seems that aside from work, many prefer staying at home, minimizing unnecessary expenses. The blogger who runs a physical store has observed that compared to last year, there are hardly any people to be seen within Beijing's Third Ring Road. This is particularly noticeable in previously bustling malls and downtown brick-and-mortar stores, where the flow of people now seems no different than during the pandemic. In contrast, suburban markets and street vendors' economies are beginning to revive, evoking a sense of nostalgia for her childhood days. The blogger shared her struggle of paying hundreds of thousands in rent annually, organizing promotions and marketing efforts to barely sustain her business. The current situation has led her to consider making some changes. A video posted by a resident shows that Wangfujing Street in Beijing is now deserted. Wangfujing is a major commercial street in the middle of Dongcheng district in Beijing. In past years, it was one of the liveliest places in Beijing, bustling with people visiting and shopping every day. Even late into the night, the street was always crowded, but now it is eerily quiet. Beijing residents have also noted a noticeable decrease in the number of foreigners in the city. Previously, the Liangma Bridge area was like an international conjunction, teeming daily with Westerners jogging alongside the Liangma River, reminiscent of the scene in Paris. Moreover, the streets of Beijing now lack vitality, always empty when evening comes, with no street vendors, sellers, photographers, or street musicians to be found. The economic powerhouse of Guangdong province in China is experiencing a similar situation.
This is Yunu Village in Guangning District, Shenzhen, Guangdong. Today is January 19th, about 20 days left until the Chinese New Year. Usually during the New Year season, people would be busy shopping, buying clothes, and strolling the streets, which is the norm. However, today, as I walked around this main street for half a day, I noticed that there were very few people around. Even the ones shopping for clothes were only a handful. It's truly quite unusual.
Similarly, Xiaojing Shannan Street in Shenzhen is unusually deserted. Prior to 2012, this street would be crowded during holidays, with businesses thriving to the point where it was difficult to secure a shop. But now the commercial street is lined with signs advertising available rental spaces.
Right now, Shannan Street feels unusually quiet. Some shops here are closed, and there aren't many people on the streets. Many shops are not open. This is the industrial area near Shannan Street called Huangpu Industrial Area, to be filled with factories, but now they have all been demolished. This area looks worn and old, and many factories have moved away, with their buildings torn down. This place used to be all about clothing shops, but now it's all dark and closed. All the shops have shut down, and no one is opening new ones.
Big cities like Beijing and Shenzhen are experiencing this. It can be imagined how it is in other areas. International observers have noted that despite China's economic recovery currently at a standstill and facing severe challenges, the National Bureau of Statistics of China officially announced on January 17th that the GDP grew by 5.2% in 2023. This figure was preliminary, revealed by Premier Li Qiang at the Davos Forum on January 16th, where he also called for increased international investment in China. However, this claim has faced widespread skepticism. Independent research by the Rhodium Group suggests that China's actual GDP growth rate in 2023 might be as low as around 1.5%. It is reported that the annual important meetings of the Chinese government, known as the Two Sessions, are set to take place in March. Ahead of the national two sessions, each province holds its own provincial meetings and releases government work reports, which include macroeconomic data from previous year and targets for the current year. Recently, 29 out of China's 31 provinces and municipalities have published related data. The figures show that last year, Guangdong became the first province to exceed a total GDP of 13 trillion yuan, with other major economic provinces such as Shandong, Zhejiang, and Sichuan surpassing 9 trillion, 8 trillion, and 6 trillion yuan, respectively. Additionally, Hunan achieved a GDP of over 5 trillion yuan for the first time, while Chongqing and Liaoning reached 3 trillion. The report also emphasized that this year, including Hainan, Inner Mongolia, Gansu, Jilin, and 12 other provinces, the economic growth rate is in line with the national average. Despite the impressive figures presented by the Chinese government, it's shown on the internet that Chinese remain rather skeptical, questioning why they still feel impoverished amidst such economic prosperity. Comments on social media expressed the western and northern parts of Guangdong are extremely poor. Others questioned, why are the GDPs of Shandong, Sichuan, and Hunan so high? Having visited these places, I found that local incomes are not high and some areas are quite underdeveloped. Some also added, let's be scientific here. Actual GDP data won't be available until at least March. For now, let's just look at the estimates. Some regions are estimated while others only have data from January to November. Someone even pointed out how a typical Chinese can easily spot that a 5.2% GDP growth figure is definitely implausible. They use an analogy of a student's final exam score having dropped in every subject, yet their overall score has somehow increased by 5.2 points. Additionally, it was found that China's National Bureau of Statistics revised the 2022 GDP figure before announcing the 2023 data. According to the revised data, the national GDP for 2022 amounted to 120.5 trillion yuan, which is a reduction of 548 billion yuan from the previously published figure. For instance, Henan province revised its GDP figures for the previous year before releasing the 2023 GDP data, astonishingly reducing the GDP number for the prior year by 213 billion yuan. This implies that just one province, Henan, had overstated the national GDP by a whopping 40% in 2022. Independent commentator Tai Xunkun has pointed out that the amount of GDP reductions just from some provinces in central China has already surpassed the total reported reductions. Hunan has reduced its figure by 111 billion yuan, Anhui by 100 billion yuan, Jiangxi by 86 billion yuan, and along with Henan's adjustments, these provinces alone have exceeded the national total. This suggests that the CCP's statistical data is treated flippantly, lacking any credibility, and should not be regarded as significant measures of economic development. The current state sees a decline in tax revenue, stock market performance, job opportunities, consumer price index, producer price index, foreign investment, number of stores, and personal incomes, yet the GDP is reported to have increased. Observers believe that the grim reality of the economic depression has brought a heightened sense of awareness to the people in China. Additionally, despite the government's bold claims about Guangdong's thriving economy, the reality appears to be quite different. According to a report from Guangdong's Finance Department on the 2023 budget execution and 2024 budget draft report, Guangdong's debt balance last year reached a high of 2.99 trillion yuan, nearing the critical threshold of 3 trillion yuan, a figure more than double the province's general public budget revenue of 2023. However, during the same period, Guangdong's local government debt balances increased by only 480 billion yuan, indicating that the growth in local debt has outpaced the ability to repay the principal and interest. Even China's strongest province economically is now facing such a predicament, with the debt pressure on other provinces being self-evident. Taiwanese macroeconomist Wu Jialong informed the Epoch Times that normally local data should be available before national data. However, China's central government has already set the previous year's GDP growth at 5.2%, and then later in March, during the national two sessions, Li Qiang will announce new national growth targets. Therefore, localities must find ways to match these figures, allowing the Statistical Bureau to make the data consistent with the targets. Such seemingly positive data are the result of localities keeping pace with the central government's fabrication, similar to the launching rockets, hyperbole, that went around during the Great Leap Forward. This refers to making the figure look good, to be in line with directives from higher authorities. Therefore, these numbers have no value for discussion. The term launching rockets specifically refers to the inflated achievements during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution after the Chinese Communist Party came to power, where there was a common practice of exaggerating achievements. Satellite launching refers to a hasty socialist construction campaign that China embarked on starting in 1958 during the Great Leap Forward. During this time, various regions in China exaggerated their achievements, especially in reporting inflated grain production figures. These false reports, such as claiming the existence of fictional wheat rockets, rice rockets, corn rockets, tobacco rockets, and similar actions across various sectors, are collectively referred to as Fang Wei Xin, literally translated to launching satellites. On June 8, 1958, the People's Daily, an official newspaper of the CCP, published an exaggerated report claiming that the satellite agriculture cooperative in Suiping County, Henan Province, achieved an average wheat yield on 5 mu of land, a traditional unit of area, reached 1,053 kilograms per mu, approximately 6,578 kilograms per acre. This report became emblematic of the first rocket yield during the Great Leap Forward movement. Others are relieved that it is not the Great Leap Forward period anymore, because if the CCP were to falsify food production figures, the consequences would be dire, potentially resulting in widespread starvation. We know that although the Chinese government lifted the stringent pandemic lockdowns at the end of 2022, the Chinese economy and people's livelihoods have suffered a severe blow after 3 years of the pandemic. The economic recovery is challenging, with the 3 key supports of the economy, exports, consumption, and investments, all slowing down. Foreign investment in China has decreased, and the Chinese stock market has repeatedly fallen. Moreover, after the youth unemployment rate hit a record high of 21.3% last June, the authorities simply stopped publishing relevant data. Up until recently, they announced a reduction of the unemployment rate of 14.9%, which has been met with significant skepticism. Wu Jialong also pointed out that China is currently facing a real estate crisis and a debt crisis, compounded by a crisis of confidence, which has ultimately led to a crisis of capital outflow and unemployment. In an attempt to attract foreign capital, authorities have misled the international community by touting an unbelievable economic growth rate of 5.2%, ensuring that all locally reported economic growth figures align with central government directives, a practice referred to as data engineering. He believes that the Chinese government's action will lead to 2 major negative consequences. Firstly, their credibility will collapse as people lose faith in official data. Secondly, foreign institutions will find it difficult to make objective judgments about China's economic prospects due to the lack of reliable official data. This will in turn worsen China's business environment and decrease the inflow of foreign capital. Major investment institutions such as Citibank and Blackstone Group have already withdrawn from the country. Former chief compliance officer of a Chinese asset management company, Liang Xiaohua, stated that the Chinese government's constant promotion of a positive economic narrative prohibiting any negative discourse only serves to illustrate the true state of the economy. Now, as authorities release these inflated growth figures, very few people believe in them. This has brought back collective memories from decades ago when regions competed to report widely exaggerated agricultural yields, echoing the CCP's historical narrative of surpassing the United States within 3 to 5 years. Liang believes that with China's economy on the brink of collapse, authorities have found no better solution than to manipulate figures to maintain an international image. In 2023, China's economy is in a downturn, with the stock market hitting new lows and sectors like exports, real estate, and manufacturing show no signs of recovery. Yet claims of significant development are being made, which is clearly unreasonable. In fact, the GDP figures announced by some regions are largely driven by debt. According to data from the International Monetary Fund, China's local debt reached 92 trillion yuan in 2022, accounting for 76% of GDP, while in 2019, local debt constituted 62.2% of GDP. Recent economic data released by various regions for 2023 show that as of January 25th, 14 provinces and cities did not meet their economic growth targets set for the previous year. Additionally, most provinces and cities have lowered their growth targets for this year. Heilongjiang province is the worst performer, with a 2023 target of around 6%, while the officially reported growth is only 2.6%. Furthermore, Guangdong province had a target of over 5%, but only achieved 4.8%, and Shanghai's target was above 5.5%, but the actual figure was just 5%. According to a summary by Time Finance, among the 25 provinces that have announced their economic growth targets for this year, 4 have raised their targets compared to last year. 9 have set targets roughly equal to last year, and 12 have lowered their targets. This situation is enough to prove that China's economic performance in 2023 is not as strong as what the government claims to be. Recent reports also reveal that China's State Council has recently issued orders targeting local governments burdened with heavy debt. These governments are now required to either suspend or delay their infrastructure projects that are less than half complete. The State Council is reportedly paying close attention to regions including Liaoning, Jilin, Guizhou, Yunnan, Tianjin, and Chongqing. They demand these local governments to take all possible measures to reduce their debt risk to as low or moderate level to mitigate potential risks to financial stability. Insiders indicate that the central government is concerned about the massive local debts and the sluggish economic growth, fearing potential default risks. The State Council has urged relevant provinces and cities to take all measures necessary to keep their debt risk at a moderate to low level. This reflects the extent to which local debt inflation has exceeded the Chinese government's threshold of tolerance. According to Chinese authorities' statistics, local government debt had already surpassed 10 trillion yuan in 2013, doubled to 20 trillion 6 years later, and rapidly exceeded 30 trillion within the next 2 years. By the end of October 2023, this figure has surpassed 40 trillion yuan. It appears that the scale and speed of taking loans far exceed the capacity to repay. People cannot help but question whether the slight increase in GDP can cover the fiscal deficit of local governments. Even if the GDP increases, if it is at the expense of recklessly mortgaging the public's hard-earned money, how can people afford to spend their income? For years, the Chinese government has been misleading the public, who have continued to live a tightening one's belt lifestyle. One can only imagine the public's perception of the so-called GDP growth they have tirelessly worked for but will never truly benefit from. A social media comment already told this great truth 20 years ago.
We definitely have to focus on GDP. Then the current GDP situation is the best. Urban areas produce counterfeit goods. Rural areas deal with substandard food products. If we exchange these, GDP figures would increase for everyone. Then as people fall ill, we can prop up the pharmaceutical industry again. Might as well include the fertilizer and pesticide industries in the GDP calculations too, even though they harm our health. If this is the path we choose, what are we truly seeking? I don't believe GDP is an inherently bad metric, but I do think that in our country, many people tend to take extreme views and treat it as an absolute measure.
Under a one-party authoritarian system, China has long endured the absurd phenomenon of wealthy nation poor people. This stems from a political structure that prioritized personal gain, often through cunning means and seizing opportunities. The Communist Party may have already made up its mind to discreetly amass wealth. They must treat ordinary citizens as the cash cows of a prosperous era. If there isn't a real era of prosperity, then they resort to using false data to create a facade. This allows them to more conveniently continue extracting hard-earned sweat and toil from the peoples indefinitely. Meanwhile, China's current plan to prevent a stock market crash is facing scrutiny. The latest rescue package involves spending about 2 trillion yuan through offshore trading platforms to purchase mainland stocks, signaling the desperate urgency of the authorities. Investors believe that this plan does not address the fundamental problems plaguing China's economy, and thus any rebound in the stock market may be short-lived. Reports have highlighted a mass exodus of global investors from China, resulting in a market plummet. There is some rare positive news that has spurred a rise in the stock market. These include the upcoming establishment of a stabilization fund and calming market directives from Chinese Premier Li Qiang. However, investors remain doubtful about the sustainability of these achievements, considering the history of China's market rescue efforts, the severe economic conditions, and the uncertainty of Beijing's policies. Given the shock of China's stock market reaching historical lows over the past 3 years and China's shrinking share in global investment portfolios, authorities simply cannot afford this risk. It is noteworthy that the Chinese government, often accused of fabricating data, has listed statistical fraud in its party discipline regulations at the end of last year. However, those implicated in statistical fraud only face internal party discipline, ranging from warnings for minor offenses to dismal or at best expulsion from the party for more severe cases. Analysts suggest that the Chinese government needs to make an example of some officials involved in fraud to assert the reliability of its data. This mirrors the logic of utilizing corrupt officials for certain tasks while also apprehending some to demonstrate a commitment to fighting corruption. Now, with the central government leading by example in fabricating data while claiming to combat fraud at the local level, it may result in government officials resorting to falsification or corruption under pressure from above. Eventually, a group is going to get caught acting as scapegoats. These are often those who side with competing factions. Thus, the current situation for officials in China is that they engage in corruption on one hand, and they simultaneously prepare escape routes, settling families overseas for safety. These are called naked officials. Moreover, while the Chinese government has mandated against fraud with stipulated punishments, it still prioritizes what it deems the political big picture. The current overarching goal is economic prosperity and growth, making other concerns secondary. In practice, the Chinese government does not explicitly instruct officials to falsify data. It simply sets target figures that local officials are expected to meet by any means. The Chinese government's falsification is not limited to economic data. It also extends to pandemic and population figures. Premier Li Qiang boasted at the Davos Forum that currently China has over 400 million middle-income individuals, and in the next decade this group is expected to double to 800 million. The demand for more and better goods and services is shifting with strong momentum for consumption upgrades. This too is a colossal falsehood. Independent commentator Tai Shun-kun has highlighted, where has China suddenly found 400 million middle-class citizens? Will 800 million enter the middle class in the next 10 years? Former Premier Li Keqiang clearly stated that at least 600 million Chinese people have a monthly income of no more than 1,000 yuan, which is about $150, similar to the income level in Kenya. The Chinese middle class, those with spending power, likely does not exceed 100 million people and is mainly composed of CCP and government official, state enterprise, as well as public institution managers and staff. Additionally, in July 2022, data for 1 billion Chinese citizens, and police records from the Shanghai State Security Bureau were up for sale online. From the sample of 750,000 citizen data provided for free perusal, some have been verified as authentic. The official silence also suggests a very low likelihood of the data being fabricated. Some individuals have pointed out that considering the recent wave of COVID-19, secondary disasters, immigration trends, and deaths, China's current population is likely under 900 million. With the continuous immigration of talented citizens for nearly 30 years, coupled with high housing prices, inflation, and the cost of childbearing, China is facing not only a significant reduction in population numbers in the coming decades, but also a substantial decline in the quality of its population. The CCP's continued regressive actions are progressively dragging China into a quagmire that could lead to the nation's downfall.